I fought for freedom in Afghanistan, but when I came back, I had to fight in my own backyard just to plant some lavender. The HOA said I broke the rules. They didn't know. I had just bought the land that this entire neighborhood stands on, and the fight this time was mine. The scent of soil filled my nostrils as I knelt in my garden, hands deep in the earth. This was my sanctuary, my therapy, my road back to peace after the chaos of war. 6 months since I'd moved to Bellwood Creek, hoping to find quiet after 3 tours in Afghanistan left me with medals I couldn't look at and nightmares I couldn't escape. The garden had become my salvation, each plant representing a step away from the darkness that followed me home. I stood up, wiping sweat from my brow, admiring the neat rows of lavender, rosemary, and native wildflowers I carefully cultivated. If you're watching this and have ever faced the unreasonable wrath of a homeowners association, drop a comment with your story. I'd love to know. I'm not alone in this fight for personal freedom right on our own property. The sound of heels clicking on pavement broke my concentration. I turned to see a woman in a tailored navy pantsuit marching up my driveway, her platinum blonde bob swinging with each determined step. Helen Rohr, HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood aesthetic police. I'd heard about her from whispered conversations at the community mailboxes, but our paths hadn't crossed until now. Her lips were pressed into a thin line as she surveyed my garden with open disdain. "Mr. Cole," she said, extending a manicured hand that I reluctantly shook. "I'm Helen Rohr, Bellwood Creek Homeowners Association president." Her voice carried the practiced warmth of someone who'd mastered the art of sounding friendly while being anything but. "I'm afraid I need to speak with you about this." She gestured vaguely at my garden situation. Felt my jaw tighten. "My garden? Is there a problem?" Helen produced a folder from her designer handbag, flipping it open with practiced efficiency. "According to our community guidelines, all landscaping must adhere to the approved Bellwood aesthetic standards. This," she waved dismissively at my carefully cultivated beds, "does not comply. The wildflowers are disorderly. The herbs section lacks uniformity, and frankly, the whole setup diminishes neighborhood property values." I took a deep breath, fighting back the familiar tightness in my chest that preceded anxiety attacks. "Mrs. Rohr, this garden is therapeutic. I'm a veteran with PTSD, and gardening is part of my treatment plan. My doctor actually prescribed it." Helen's expression didn't soften. If anything, her eyes grew colder. "While I certainly appreciate your service, Mr. Cole, rules are rules. We can't make exceptions based on personal circumstances. You'll need to remove the non-compliant elements within 14 days or face fines." She handed me a violation notice with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome to Bellwood Creek." As she strode away, I stood there, notice in hand, feeling that familiar sense of powerlessness I'd struggled to overcome since returning to civilian life. But something else stirred beneath the surface. Determination. I'd fought for freedom overseas. Surely, I could fight for the right to grow a garden on my own property. The next morning, I went to check my mailbox and found my neighbor, Lydia Wynn, retrieving her mail. In her 70s, Lydia had the kind of quiet dignity that spoke of a life well lived. Her own garden, a lush collection of vibrant flowers and Vietnamese herbs, was a neighborhood standout. When she spotted me, she offered a warm smile. "Morning, Ethan. How are you settling in?" I showed her the violation notice. "Apparently, my therapy garden isn't up to Bellwood standards." Lydia's face darkened. Helen's at it again. "That woman has been terrorizing this neighborhood for years." She lowered her voice. "She tried to make me remove my bird feeders last spring, claiming they attracted undesirable wildlife. I told her the only undesirable wildlife I'd seen was carrying a clipboard and wearing designer shoes." She winked, and I couldn't help but laugh. "What can I do? This garden isn't just a hobby for me. It's helping me manage my PTSD." Lydia considered this, her eyes thoughtful. "Come to the HOA meeting tomorrow night. Make your case publicly." Helen hates being challenged in front of others. She patted my arm gently. And don't worry, you've got allies here. The community center buzzed with conversations that abruptly died when I walked in. About 30 residents sat in neat rows facing a long table, where Helen held court with 4 other board members. I recognized a few faces. Lydia Way from the 3rd row and my neighbor Marcus Kim, a reclusive guy who rarely spoke to anyone, sat in the back corner, eyes fixed on his laptop. Something about his intense focus made me curious about what he was really doing behind that screen. I found a seat just as Helen called the meeting to order. For 40 minutes, I sat through discussions about fence paint colors, lawn maintenance schedules, and the upcoming community picnic. Finally, Helen reached new business. We have a compliance issue at 27 Oak Avenue. Helen announced, displaying photos of my garden on a projector screen. As you can see, this unauthorized garden violates multiple aesthetic standards outlined in Section 4.3 of our community guidelines. She clicked through several close-up shots, pointing out infractions with the precision of a prosecutor building a case. I realized with growing anger that she must have taken these photos while I was at work, trespassing on my property in the process. The homeowner has been issued a notice and has 14 days to comply before fines are assessed. Helen's tone was matter-of-fact, as if my garden was an eyesore on par with an abandoned car or piles of garbage. I stood up, heart pounding. That garden belongs to me, and it's part of my doctor-prescribed therapy for combat PTSD. A hush fell over the room. Helen's smile tightened. Mr. Cole, there's a procedure for addressing the board. You need to be on the agenda. I wasn't aware you'd be displaying photos of my private property tonight, or I would have requested to be on it, I countered, feeling all eyes on me. Since you've chosen to discuss my home, I think I have the right to respond. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Helen's nostrils flared slightly. The first crack in her composed facade. Very well. You have 2 minutes. I took a deep breath and faced the room. My name is Ethan Cole. I served 3 tours in Afghanistan with Special Forces. When I came home, I brought more than medals with me. I brought nightmares, anxiety, and triggers that make ordinary life a battlefield. My voice was steady, though my hands trembled slightly. My doctor recommended horticultural therapy, gardening, to help manage my symptoms. That non-compliant garden is helping me heal. It's not hurting anyone. It's maintained, weed-free, and frankly, it's on my private property where it shouldn't concern anyone else. Several residents nodded, and I caught Lydia's encouraging smile. While I sympathize with your situation, Mr. Cole, Helen said, her voice dripping with artificial compassion. We have guidelines that everyone must follow. If we make exceptions, where do we draw the line? Next, someone will want to park an RV in their driveway or paint their house neon green. There's a difference between a therapeutic garden and neon paint, I argued. And the Americans with Disabilities Act provides for reasonable accommodations. The ADA doesn't supersede private contractual agreements like our HOA covenants, Helen interrupted. You signed these covenants when you purchased your home, Mr. Cole. If the garden is that important to you, perhaps Bellwood Creek isn't the right community for you. The room fell silent. I felt my chest tighten with that familiar pressure, the precursor to a panic attack. Just as I feared I might lose control, an unexpected voice broke the tension. That's not entirely accurate. Marcus Kim closed his laptop and stood up. All heads turned toward him, surprise evident on many faces. Apparently Marcus speaking at a meeting was a rare occurrence. The Fair Housing Act includes PTSD as a qualifying disability, and HOAs are required to make reasonable accommodations. A garden seems pretty reasonable to me. Helen's eyes narrowed. Thank you for your input, Mr. Kim, but unless you suddenly become a lawyer, I suggest we defer to actual legal expertise. She turned to an older man at the board table. Richard, you're our legal counsel. Care to weigh in? Richard cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. While there are indeed provisions for disabilities, The board has broad discretion in determining what constitutes reasonable accommodation versus what fundamentally alters the nature of the community. Ellen's triumphant smile returned. Exactly. And we determined that this garden violates our aesthetic standards. Mr. Cole has 14 days to comply or face daily fines of $50. Next item on the agenda. I left the meeting with a hollow feeling in my stomach. In the parking lot, Lydia caught up with me. Don't give up, Ethan. Helen's been getting away with this kind of bullying for too long. What can I do? I can't afford endless fines, but that garden is keeping me sane. A voice behind us made us both turn. You fight back. Marcus Kim stood there, laptop bag slung over his shoulder. Up close, I noticed the dark circles under his eyes, and the slight hunch of someone who spent too many hours at a computer. Not directly. That's what she wants. You need to be smarter than her. I looked at him curiously. What did you have in mind? Marcus glanced around, lowering his voice. Every system has vulnerabilities, even Helen's perfect little kingdom. We just need to find them. He handed me a business card with just a phone number. Call me tomorrow, not from your home phone. Without further explanation, he walked to a nondescript sedan and drove away. Lydia and I exchanged puzzled looks. Marcus keeps to himself, she explained. He moved here 2 years ago. Rumor has it he used to work in cybersecurity for the government before some kind of falling out. Helen's tried to find him multiple times for having too many satellite dishes, but he always seems to make the complaints disappear. I pocketed the card, intrigued. Any port in a storm, I guess. The next morning, I called Marcus from a coffee shop downtown. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting for my call. Meet me at Riverside Park in 30 minutes. Northeast corner by the chess tables. He hung up before I could respond. When I arrived, Marcus was setting up chess pieces, looking for all the world like someone preparing for a casual game. He motioned for me to sit opposite him. We should look like we're just playing chess. Helen has eyes everywhere. Isn't this a bit paranoid? I asked, moving a pawn forward. Marcus countered with his own move. Is it paranoia if they're really watching? Helen has at least 3 board members who report neighborhood activities to her. Plus, she pays the landscaping company extra to inform on residents. Among the group, he lowered his voice. I've been monitoring the HOA's digital communications. Helen's been targeting specific homeowners who don't fit her vision of what Bellwood should be. You're just the latest. I moved another piece, processing this information. And how exactly do you know all this? Marcus gave a thin smile. Let's just say digital security was my specialty before I retired. The HOA's network security is laughable, but that's not why I wanted to meet. He leaned forward. I think I found something that might help you. Have you looked at your property survey recently? I shook my head. I just have whatever paperwork came with the house. Most people never bother to verify their property boundaries. They trust the realtor or the previous owner. Marcus moved his bishop aggressively. I've been mapping the actual legal boundaries of properties in Bellwood against what the HOA claims in their documentation. There are discrepancies. What kind of discrepancies? The kind that could give you leverage. He handed me a USB drive. This contained surveys, county records, and property maps. Focus on the northwest section of the neighborhood, particularly the main entrance and common areas. Compare the official county records with the HOA's documents. I'm not sure I follow. Marcus captured one of my pawns. You will just look at the files and be careful. If Helen realizes what you're doing, she'll come at you even harder. He stood up abruptly. Let's not be seen together too much. Check the files, then call me from a secure line. With that, he packed up the chess pieces and walked away, leaving me confused but curious. That evening, I pored over the files Marcus had given me. Most were technical documents filled with legal jargon and property coordinates that meant little to me. But when I compared the official county maps with the HOA's documentation, I began to see what Marcus was hinting at. There was an 80 stretch of land at the main entrance to Bellwood Creek containing the decorative stone gateway, part of the guardhouse, and the visitor parking area that didn't appear to be included in the HOA's legally registered common property. According to county records, it was still part of the original undivided parcel that had never been properly transferred to the HOA during development. I called Marcus from a burner phone I had purchased. I think I see the discrepancy, but I don't understand how this helps me. It helps because it shows the HOA doesn't actually own all the land they claim to control, Marcus explained. That entrance parcel was supposed to be transferred after the development was completed, but the paperwork was never filed correctly. Technically, it's still available for purchase from the county. I felt a plan beginning to form. So someone could buy it. Someone with proper documentation of their identity and an understanding of county land procedures could. Yes, Marcus confirmed. But they'd need to move quickly and quietly. I need a lawyer, I decided. Not just any lawyer, Marcus cautioned. You need someone who won't be intimidated by Helen and who understands real estate law. I might know someone. Meet me tomorrow, same place, same time. The next day, I found myself sitting across from Trevor Lang, a young but sharp-eyed attorney whom Marcus had somehow convinced to meet us at the park. Trevor reviewed the documents with the quick efficiency of someone used to finding needles in legal haystacks. "This is interesting," he said, finally looking up from his tablet. "The land parcel was never properly transferred. It's still listed as available county land. In theory, someone could purchase it, though there would be immediate legal challenges from the HOA. Would those challenges succeed?" I asked. Trevor considered this. Not necessarily. The HOA has been using the land as if they own it, but legally they don't. They've essentially been trespassing on county property for years. If someone else were to purchase it legitimately, he left the implication hanging. How quickly could this be done? I pressed with the right paperwork and a compelling reason for the county to expedite the process. A week, maybe 2, Trevor estimated. But once you make a move, the HOA will find out quickly. You'd need to be prepared for significant pushback. I nodded, determination replacing uncertainty. I serve my country to protect freedom. I never thought I'd have to fight for it in my own backyard, but here we are. I extended my hand to Trevor. Let's do this. For the next week, I lived in a state of tense preparation. Trevor worked his legal magic, filing paperwork with the county to purchase the entrance parcel. I liquidated a portion of my savings to cover the cost. Steep, but worth it for the leverage it would provide. Meanwhile, I continued tending my garden, ignoring the increasingly hostile notices from the HOA demanding its removal. On day 12 of my 14-day compliance window, Helen escalated her tactics. I returned home from a therapy appointment to find a landscaping crew in my yard, measuring my garden with tape measures and marking boundaries with small flags. "What's going on here?" I demanded, approaching the crew foreman. He consulted a clipboard. HOA ordered inspection. "Sir, we're documenting the non-compliant areas for removal." "Removal? The compliance window isn't even up yet." "Just following orders," he shrugged. "We're scheduled to remove everything in these marked areas on day 15, if you haven't done it yourself." I felt my blood pressure rising. "Get off my property now." The foreman looked uncomfortable, but stood his ground. "We have authorization from the HOA, which doesn't override my rights as a property owner. Leave, or I'm calling the police for trespassing." The crew packed up and left, but the message was clear. Helen was done waiting. That evening, I received another notice. This one claiming my garden had been inspected and found to contain potentially invasive species that threatened the ecological balance of the community. It was a blatant lie, but it gave Helen a new angle of attack. I called Trevor immediately. "They're moving faster than we expected. How much longer on the paperwork?" "I've got good news," Trevor replied. "The county expedited the process after I explained the situation. The land is yours as of this morning. I'll email you the documentation right away." Relief flooded through me. What's our next move? Normally, I'd advise caution and a gradual legal approach, Trevor said. But given their aggressive tactics, we might need to make a statement. How comfortable are you with confrontation, Ethan? I thought about the battles I'd fought overseas, and the internal battles I'd fought since returning home. I can handle confrontation. I just need it to be on my terms, not Helen's. The next morning, day 13, I drove to a hardware store and purchased several no trespassing and private property signs along with metal posts to mount them. With Trevor's documentation in hand, I drove to the Bellwood Creek entrance and began installing signs around the perimeter of my newly acquired property. It took less than 20 minutes for Helen to appear, screeching to a halt in her luxury SUV. She stormed toward me, face flushed with anger. "What do you think you're doing? Remove those signs immediately." I continued hammering a post into the ground, not looking up. "I'm marking my property boundaries, Mrs. Rohr. Standard practice for new landowners. This is HOA common property. You have no right." I straightened up and handed her a copy of the county deed. Actually, this land was never properly transferred to the HOA. It's been county property all these years, and as of yesterday, it belongs to me. These documents confirm it. Ellen snatched the papers, her eyes darting back and forth as she read. Her face palled, then reamed with fury. This is outrageous. It's some kind of mistake or fraud. Your lawyers will confirm what I'm telling you," I interrupted calmly. "This land, including the entrance gateway and visitor parking, legally belongs to me now. And as the property owner, I have certain rights, including the right to control who accesses it." The implications of what I was saying slowly dawned on Helen. You wouldn't dare." I hammered in the final sign. This one reading access by permission only, and faced her directly. "I've tried reasoning with you about my garden. I've explained my medical needs. I've followed proper procedures. You've responded with threats, trespassing, and lies about invasive species. So yes, Mrs. Rohr, I absolutely would dare. This is blackmail," she hissed. "No, this is negotiation. You want access to this entrance for the community. I want to keep my therapeutic garden without harassment. I think we can find a middle ground, don't you?" Helen's phone began ringing nonstop as residents trying to enter or leave Bellwood encountered my signs and called her in confusion. A small crowd was gathering at the entrance, watching our confrontation with interest. "This is going to reflect very poorly on you, Mr. Hole," Helen threatened, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. "The community will turn against you for this stunt. Let's find out, shall we?" I gestured to the growing audience. "Would you like to explain to them why they suddenly can't access their homes? Or shall I?" Helen's jaw worked silently as she calculated her options. Finally, she snapped, "Emergency HOA meeting tonight, 7 o'clock. She turned on her heel and stalked away, already barking orders into her phone. Word spread quickly through Bellwood. By 6:30 that evening, the community center was packed beyond capacity with residents spilling out into the hallway. The mood was tense, a mixture of confusion, anger, and curiosity. I arrived early and took a seat in the front row, Trevor beside me with a briefcase full of documentation. Marcus slipped in quietly and positioned himself near the audiovisual equipment, giving me a subtle nod. At precisely 7, Helen entered with the board members and took her place at the center of the table. Her usual polished appearance was slightly frayed around the edges, a testament to the day's stress. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice strained yet commanding. "We're facing an unprecedented situation. Mr. Cole," she gestured dismissively toward me, "has engaged in what I can only describe as extortionate behavior by exploiting a minor clerical error in property records." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Helen raised her voice slightly. "He has effectively blocked access to our community entrance and is attempting to use this as leverage to force the HOA to allow his non-compliant landscaping. This is nothing short of blackmail, and the board intends to pursue all legal options to resolve this matter. Trevor stood, if I may address the allegations. As Mr. Coe's legal representative, Helen looked as if she'd rather eat glass, but nodded curtly. Briefly, Trevor approached the podium with calm professionalism. My name is Trevor Lang, and I represent Mr. Cole. What Mrs. Rohr describes as a minor clerical error is actually a significant legal oversight that has persisted for 8 years. The HOA has been exercising control over land it doesn't own, collecting fees for its maintenance, and using it as a leverage point against homeowners. He distributed copies of the county records to the board members. Mr. Cole has legally purchased this property through proper channels. His ownership is legitimate and binding. Rather than blackmail, my client is simply exercising his property rights while seeking a reasonable resolution to ongoing harassment regarding his therapeutic garden, which is protected under both the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act. This is a technicality, Helen interrupted. The land was always intended to be HOA property. Intent doesn't override legal reality, Trevor countered smoothly. The fact remains that the HOA has been making decisions about land it doesn't own for years, which raises serious questions about other HOA actions and financial decisions. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. An older man raised his hand. I don't understand. Are you saying we've been paying HOA fees for maintenance of land that wasn't even ours? Trevor nodded. According to HOA financial records, approximately 15% of annual dues have been allocated to entrance maintenance and security. That's roughly $150,000 over 8 years spent on property the HOA had no legal right to control. The room erupted in angry exclamations. Helen banged her gavel repeatedly, struggling to regain control. This meeting is about Mr. Cole's obstruction, not HOA finances. Actually, Marcus' voice cut through the noise as he stood up. The issues are directly related. He approached the front, carrying his laptop. May I? He asked, gesturing to the projector setup. Before Helen could object, Marcus had connected his computer and brought up a series of spreadsheets on the screen. While examining the property discrepancy, I also discovered some interesting patterns in HOA financial records. He clicked through several documents showing expense reports, vendor contracts, and bank statements. Several vendors charging premium rates for entrance maintenance happened to be registered to relatives of board members. And there's a recurring administrative fee being paid to a consulting company that appears to be owned by Mrs. Rohr's husband. Helen's face drained of color. This is absurd. Where did you get these records? This is unauthorized access. These are HOA records that should be available to all members upon request. Marcus replied calmly. The fact that you're more concerned about how I access them than about their content is telling. The room had fallen completely silent. All eyes now moving between Marcus and Helen. I decided it was time to speak up. I didn't come here to expose financial irregularities or take control of the entrance, I said, standing to address the room. I just wanted to be left alone to tend my garden in peace. It helped me manage the PTSD I brought home from war. But when reasoning failed, when medical documentation was ignored, when threats and intimidation became the response for a simple request for understanding, I had to find another way. I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many residents as possible. I don't want to restrict anyone's access to their homes. I don't want to create division in this community. I just want the same respect and consideration I tried to show when I first moved here. Lydia stood up from her seat. I'd like to say something. Her soft voice carried surprising authority. I've lived in Bellwood Creek for 20 years. I watched these houses being built. I was here when we voted to form the HOA to maintain common areas and ensure basic standards. She looked directly at Helen. But somewhere along the way, maintaining standards became enforcing uniformity. Community oversight became personal power. I had my garden destroyed last week after speaking in support of Ethan. My birds' feeders were removed without my permission. She turned to address the crowd. Is this the community we want to be? Where a man who fought for our freedom can't plant a garden to heal his wounds. Where an old woman can't feed birds without permission. Where we're paying for land we don't own and services that mostly benefit board members' families. The mood in the room had shifted dramatically. What had started as confusion and anger toward me had transformed into indignation directed at Helen and the board. Sensing the change, Richard, the HOA's legal counsel, cleared his throat. Given these revelations, I believe it would be prudent for the board to enter into good faith negotiations with Mr. Cole regarding both the property issue and his accommodation request. He glanced nervously at Helen, and perhaps a full audit of HOA finances would be appropriate. Ellen's composure finally cracked. This is a coordinated attack. Cole moves in and suddenly we have property disputes and financial accusations. This is a coup, plain and simple. Marcus pressed a button on his laptop and Helen's voice filled the room from the speakers. The beauty of HOA regulations is their flexibility. Flexible enough to squeeze out the undesirables while giving cover to our friends. These people signed away their rights when they bought here. We can interpret the rules however we want, and there's nothing they can do about it. It's all perfectly legal. The recording ended, leaving a stunned silence. Marcus spoke quietly. That was from the board's private meeting 3 months ago, discussing strategies for community improvement, which apparently meant targeting certain homeowners for removal. Helen's face contorted with rage. You recorded a private meeting? That's illegal. Not when there's evidence of fraud being discussed, Trevor interjected. And especially not when that recording was accidentally captured by the Community Sense own security system, which Mr. Kim helps maintain as a volunteer. Someone in the back of the room called out. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in the current board. I second that motion. Another voice shouted. What followed was a scene I never expected to witness. The complete and rapid collapse of Helena's power structure. The community voted overwhelmingly to remove the entire board and establish an interim committee to audit finances and review all HOA policies. Helen stormed out before the final tally was announced, leaving behind the shambles of her carefully constructed kingdom. As the meeting broke up, residents approached me with handshakes, pats on the back, and apologies for not standing up sooner. Lydia gave me a warm hug. You did it, Ethan. You stood your ground. We all did. I corrected her, looking around at the energized community members discussing reforms and audits. This was never just about my garden. Marcus appeared at my side, laptop tucked under his arm. Not bad for a guy who just wanted to grow some lavender. I laughed. I had help from a mysterious tech genius and a fiery grandmother. Pretty good team. Trevor joined us, looking pleased. The interim committee wants to meet tomorrow to discuss the entrance property. I think they'll be very receptive to a reasonable arrangement that benefits everyone, including keeping your garden, Lydia added. They're already talking about reviewing all the aesthetic restrictions. Some people are even suggesting a community garden project. Over the next few weeks, Bellwood Creek underwent a transformation more significant than any landscaping change could have created. The interim committee, which I declined to join despite multiple requests, worked diligently to reform the HOA's structure and policies. A full financial audit revealed years of questionable contracts and selling by Helen and several board members. Legal proceedings were initiated to recover misappropriated funds. The entrance property issue was resolved through a fair agreement. I transferred ownership to a newly established community land trust in exchange for permanent easements protecting my garden and similar therapeutic or personal expression projects by other residents. Marcus volunteered to set up a transparent online system for HOA communications and decision-making, ensuring that no future board could operate in secrecy. Perhaps most surprisingly, Helen's downfall sparked a community renaissance. Neighbors who had barely spoken to each other under her regime of fear now collaborated on improvement projects. The rigid uniformity that had characterized Bellwood began to give way to thoughtful diversity. Gardens bloomed, creative mailboxes appeared, and children's laughter returned to previously silent streets. 6 months after the confrontation, on a perfect spring afternoon, Bellwood Creek held its first community garden festival. The event centered around a new shared garden space that had been created in what was once an underutilized corner of the neighborhood park. Residents of all ages worked together, planting flowers, vegetables, and herbs in plots that reflected their diverse tastes and cultural backgrounds. I stood back, watching with quiet satisfaction, as Lydia taught a group of children how to transplant seedlings. My own garden had flourished, expanding beyond its original boundaries with the community's blessing. The lavender that had been my first planting, once nearly destroyed by Helen's vendetta, now grew in luxurious purple waves, attracting butterflies and filling the air with its calming scent. Marcus appeared beside me, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. The perpetual tension in his shoulders noticeably diminished. Quite a different place now, isn't it? I nodded, taking in the scene of neighbors working together, laughing, sharing gardening tips and stories. Hard to believe this is the same Bellwood Creek. It's not, Marcus said simply. You changed it. I shook my head. We all did. It just needed someone to start pushing back. Lydia joined us, wiping soil from her hands. You know what the best part is? Helen's house just sold. The new owners are a young couple with 3 kids and a street Bernard. They've already asked about planting a vegetable garden. She chuckled. I think they'll fit right in. As the afternoon sun began its descent, casting long golden rays across the community garden, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before my first deployment. A sense of belonging, of peace, of home. The nightmares hadn't disappeared completely, and some days were still harder than others. But the garden, both my private sanctuary and this new communal space, provided an anchor when the storms came. I knelt down and placed my hands in the soil, feeling its cool dampness between my fingers. This was what I had fought for overseas. Not just abstract concepts of freedom and democracy, but the right of people to live with dignity, to express themselves, to build communities based on mutual respect rather than fear and control. You know, Lydia said, watching me with a knowing smile, in my culture, we believe that gardens are where heaven and earth meet, a place where the spirits of ancestors can find peace. I looked up at her, struck by the sentiment. I like that idea. Sometimes when I'm working in my garden, I feel closer to the friends I lost, like they're there with me somehow. She nodded. They are, and so are we. She gestured to the community around us. Marcus, with his technical expertise now directed toward building rather than exposing, Trevor, who had stayed on as a community advisor, the interim committee members, who had worked tirelessly to reform the HOA, and dozens of neighbors who had found their voices after years of silence. A child's laughter rang out across the garden, bright and unfettered. I watched as a little girl proudly showed her mother a worm she discovered, the mother's face reflecting wonder rather than disgust. Small moments of joy and discovery that would have been stifled under Helen's reign now flourished openly. The community had healed just as my garden had helped heal me. Not completely, not perfectly. There were still disagreements and challenges, as there would be in any group of diverse individuals living in close proximity. But the foundation had shifted from control to cooperation, from fear to mutual respect. As twilight deepened and solar-powered garden lights began to illuminate pathways between the plots, creating a magical landscape of gentle illumination, I realized that my fight for a simple therapy garden had yielded something far more valuable, a renewed sense of purpose and connection. In defending my small patch of earth, I had helped reclaim an entire community's soul. I stood up, brushing soil from my hands, and joined the neighbors gathering for an impromptu picnic on the community lawn. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new plants to tend, perhaps even new battles to fight. But tonight, under a sky transitioning from gold to deep indigo, surrounded by the community that had become my new unit, my new mission, I was exactly where I needed to be, rooted in the present, growing toward the future, finally and truly home.